Hi, this is Andersen of Royal Hunt, and you're listening to Sonic Perspectives.
Hello, this is Nick with Sonic Perspectives, and today I have the pleasure of talking with the keyboardist and songwriter for Danish progressive and power metal act Royal Hunt. Welcome, Andre.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your program.
Andre, let's begin by setting a starting point for those who may not know who Royal Hunt is. You yourself are a Dutch musician, and Royal Hunt began with you over 25 years ago, but despite where you are, you have a long history of utilizing American vocalists. Your music relies more heavily on your keyboards than most of your peers, I would say. With that said, to the average power progressive metal listener, what are the standout attributes of Royal Hunt?
Well, so there's a bunch, but the main idea from the very beginning was to create a unique sound. You know, when I was growing up as a kid, I've been listening to bands like Queen and Pink Floyd, all the classics, you know, and everybody sounded different. They have something specific about the sound. It's not only songwriting, it's even the sound. So from the very beginning, that was our goal, and I was fortunate enough to play with people surrounded me, the musicians I've been playing, and they had the same goal. So if you listen to our debut album, I mean, it's a little naive and this and that, but basically we had a foundation there. There's big harmonies, and yes, keyboards are pretty much present, and we just evolved on the base of that.
Yeah, and one of the cool things I'd say about the early era of the band is you can really, if you start with Land of Broken Hearts, the debut, through the first few albums, Clown in the Mirror and Moving Target, you really see the evolution of a band coming into its own, because I think it is with Moving Target that you really see what the band would become. I love those early albums, but you know the first two I wouldn't say are representative of what the end goal of the band were.
Absolutely. The first one was just a try. Everybody had an idea how we wanted to sound, you know, so it's because basically we got together in the band because it sounds ridiculous, but we couldn't buy music like that in the shop, you know, so everybody has the influences, and we collected albums of Rush and Kansas and Deep Purple, Whitesnake, whatever, and Queensryche, what else. There's tons and tons of different bands, but nobody was playing exactly the kind of music we were aiming at. So I started kind of like creating from the beginning, and then the rest of the guys joined, you know, their own sound and perspective, you know, and all of a sudden they had a little special something, a special unit with a special sound. And yes, you're right. So by the time we hit like Moving Target, it was I think in about 95 or something like that. So we kind of like developed to that, and of course you mature. You develop further with next album, and tour, and that. But yeah, so you can sell. But listening to Moving Target, that period between Clown in the Mirror and Moving Target, that was something we were aiming at.
Mm-hmm. And now, you know, talking a little bit about that sound that you were going for, and you know that way you wanted to be the ideal sound for Royal Hunt. One of the things that I think sets the band apart is your keyboards and how they are utilized. Can you explain a little bit about pushing that instrument past, you know, background orchestration and, you know, the occasional lead that is seen in a lot of other power metal?
Yeah, it's my background is a little bit different, you know. So most of I started playing classical piano at the age of 5. So I started very early. So by the time I hit that age, you know, like 12, 13, and everybody started getting into bands and stuff like that, I had this idea almost like band sounding almost like an orchestra. And what I meant, it is like even the guitar and drums is a part of it. So I never saw it as like guitar-based, like hard rock band, and then you have some additional instruments, you know, a bass, a keyboards, whatever. So everybody was equal. Somebody was working on a rhythmical side, a melodic side, or creative those sonic landscapes, sometimes in the background, sometimes in the front. You know, so all the instruments were equal from the beginning. Actually, on the very first albums, I saw guitar, distorted guitar, almost like a cello, because I grew up with classical. So I saw this role like a cello in the orchestra, you know. So I mean, this mishmash of different ideas and the background created this kind of sound with keyboards kind of like one step forward compared to so many other hard rock bands we've been listening to at the time, where keyboards were more subdued in a way.
Mm-hmm. Now, over time, the keyboard's role has certainly, if anything, grown. It is a very keyboard-heavy band. Do you think that having only one guitarist in the band has helped, sonically to explore with the instrument? Do you think Royal Hunt would ever have sounded so keyboard-heavy if you had to try to make room for two guitarists?
I guess so. I mean, it wasn't part of the plan anyway, but so I just realized, because I've been playing in different bands before, and a lot of bands, more traditional hard rock, heavy metal bands with two guitar players, and they were arguing all the time about the parts. So I decided, if I'm starting something, there'll be only one guy.
No one has to argue about who gets the guitar solos.
No, I mean, it was ridiculous.
Now, I've been a fan for many years of Royal Hunt, and one thing that stuck out to me that I didn't quite grasp, even though I've been a long-time fan, is I was looking back, and I looked at Land of Broken Hearts. It came out in 1992, and this year saw the release of your 14th album, Cast in Stone, and through that entire span, there's never been more than a 3-year gap between releases. What do you attribute that type of stability of studio releases, especially when the lineup has not always been the most stable? So how do you keep putting out music on such a consistent basis?
There's several reasons, but obviously there's one practical one. I have a studio. I've been running a recording studio for I don't know how many years by now. I mean, in the beginning, the first 10, 12, 15 years, I've been working the studios in different ones and owned one, and obviously it's been a part of it. So I mean, so I could work anytime. I realized very early in my career, when I was playing with different bands, it's such a huge problem it was every time we were supposed to record a demo. I mean, because it was expensive, you have to book time, and you have only limited time. So I didn't want that. So I started building my own studio very early. So I could always have access to it. And another thing is probably I'm getting bored pretty easily when when I'm pulled away from music. It's not like I'm creating something every single day and every single hour, but constantly I have some ideas. I put them on tape, or now it's a hard disk, whatever it is, and most of it honestly is rubbish. Mm-hmm. But there are always some bits and pieces which are interesting, and I'm presenting them to the band, whatever incarnation of the band has been, as I say, on a very early stage, and everybody's getting involved, and they're saying, okay, this riff sounds kind of cool, or this sounds ugly, or whatever, so we're always in the process of doing something new, a new material. And I think it's very important for a band to be creative all the time, because unfortunately, especially in the last 10 or 12 years, I mean, you see bands, they're not even putting albums out. They're just touring. I know it's economical, part of it is playing a big role, but still, I think for a band to be like 100% band, like active unit, you have to create something new all the time.
Yeah, and I think, there's definitely a disconnect. You see, especially young and struggling artists who are just really struggling to get their creative ideas out there and release albums. And then you have bands, like Tool or somebody like that, who has every resource in the world, who can go 10 years and can't manage to put out an album. It's kind of sad in the way, that they have everything, yet still can't get that creativity out there.
I understand that, and as it's I'm meeting a lot of my idols from the time when I was a kid, and I keep asking this question. So you're recording an album, and I'm getting all these explanations. For us to get together and record something costs that and that much. I do understand that part. I have the same problems from time to time. And then they're saying, when we're going out and playing, and everybody wants to hear the hits which they already know, and so what's the point? It might sound a little bit naive, but I mean, for yourself, I mean, as if you're not creating a new music, let's say for a year, it's fine, but for 2 or 3 years, getting stale. I probably, if I'll be in their shoes, I'll start feeling like I'm going to work. You know what I mean? Like 9 to 5, because you're
Yeah,
playing the same songs over and over again. I do understand fans want it, but still, you can still insert some new, interesting ideas, new songs. At least I think so. I don't know.
yeah, it's something that I've seen that really puts me off. I would almost rather a band go into full nostalgia mode than those who put out an album as an excuse to tour and then play one song off the album they just put out. It seems so counterproductive.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of bands, but at the same time, so one of the bands I adore, since they actually got me started on the rock music, somebody like Deep Purple, and I watched them live, and they're putting out new albums and they're playing new material. I really, really, really respect that, and I'm enjoying it. I'm not saying I'm getting the same kick of the new songs as I did when I heard Highway Star or Smoke in the Water for the first time in my life, because it's been like, I don't know, when I was 12 or 13 when I did. But still, I mean, respect for at least trying.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing, you'd mentioned that you had your own studio for many years now. We just had a recent podcast on this and the technology that's evolved over the years to help musicians. As someone who's been at the helm of producing music for such a long time, what do you think the biggest leaps in your time have been in being able to record albums?
I mean, technologically, it was nothing less but revolution. It's unbelievable what you can get today for a fraction of the cost. Because I've been running studio for so long time, I knew like huge machines, they cost like $50,000-$60,000 easily, and a good board, for God's sake, it was a fortune. And today you can get quality equipment for like literally just like 1/10, I don't know, like 20th of the price. And the possibilities you have, and some bands utilizing that with sampling and whatever. You don't know where to start. I mean, it's mind blowing compared to what's been like even 20 years ago. On another hand, there are some downfalls in that, because I mean, people starting relying on these things too much. And not to criticize anybody. I mean, of course, everybody has chosen their own path, a musical path, So, but I have a feeling, especially with hard rock, so we'll concentrate on this kind of music, and people relying on that too much. I mean, everything is quantized, everything's sounding kind of digital, too much. And so on one hand, you have this affordability, you have access, all the great toys you could never dream of, like 15 or 20 years ago. And on in another hand, you have this, dare I say, faceless albums coming out, built on that technology, and there's not enough work into it. You don't sense the work, the passion into it. It's so it's hard. It's very double-edged sword, I guess.
Yes, and would you say that there's probably some material out there too that sometimes seem underdeveloped, because it is so easy now to be able to record album that people who would never have set foot in a studio yet, years ago, everyone's able to get an album out there, which is great, like you say, from one perspective. But on the other hand, there's a lot of underdeveloped or things that aren't quite ready out there because people are able to get it out there a lot sooner.
Yeah, and a lot of bands never played live before. But there's even the record companies today. They're putting together those like smaller independent companies. They're putting together all these projects. Taking one musician from this band, another from another. They put them together, and actually, guys they never met in the studio. I mean, they're just sending files to each other. So there's no band, there's no spirit, there's nothing there. And of course, sometimes you got to get lucky, and all of a sudden the record sounds great. But it's so rare nowadays. And sometimes I'm helping some of my friends, and musicians you meet somewhere, and they want to do an overdub, for some production they're doing, and they're coming into the studio, and I'm amazed. Sometimes the guitar player will come in, and he'll play the verse, and that's it. So I said, what about the rest? Okay, you can just cut and paste. I mean, how you do that? I mean, you personally satisfied with that? It sounds so mechanical to me. What if you play a second verse differently?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it sounds good enough. I mean, all right, have your own way, so I'm not opposed to that. But, I mean, I'll never do that. I mean, you'll always play the entire song, and then you'll punch in and change something in the chorus or whatever, instrumental. It's a process, and it's fun, and it's creative.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that we were, again, talking about recently, is that there was a time where you actually had to go in and record the song, your part, in one take, and that would just baffle some musicians today, the thought of recording a full 4 or 5 minutes in one take.
Yeah, you wouldn't even mention it because it will scare people to death, especially the younger musicians, I mean, how you do that, it's just like, it's that simple. You put your gear up and you play through the song. I mean,
Yep. Now, one thing, again, you've been doing this a long time now, and, you've done things the traditional route with a label for many years as far as releasing albums, but you also have recently gone to crowdfunding. And what are the advantages of that for a band like Royal Hunt? And is there a reason that for the last few releases you've chosen Pledge Music over other platforms?
I mean, right now we even went farther than that. We're not using Pledge Music, so we're doing all the campaigns on our own website at royalhunt.com. And the reason for that, I mean, as I said, I was very opposed to that to start with, because I'm old school, I used to have like a record label and this and that, but I just realized it's completely, it's not completely different story, but it's in many ways it's different. I mean, so you're dealing with fans all of a sudden, and you're not dealing through the middleman. I'm not talking about the economical aspect, like more kind of like a personal aspect. It's more fun to us now to do some kind of an update with the video and the whole thing, and we can put it up in seconds. And the record company, you have to have it approved, you have to send it to them, and it's a process. And you're not the only band on the label, obviously. So you don't have this first priority at the moment, and we'll talk about it next week. Here, everything we do is immediate. And it's really cool, really cool. I'm enjoying it. And so it could be a drag from time to time, but most of the time it's enjoyable. And I just realized in the times where most of the people, they more or less, they stop buying music. I mean, you don't have to, because you have Spotify, you have this and that, all the streaming services. And we still have like an army of people, not as large as Metallica or anybody else, but still our own army, and they're coming back and they're buying albums, they're enjoying it, and in a way they feel that they're dealing with you directly. They almost kind of investing in a band in a way, because obviously it's logic. When they're buying albums and some kind of merch and then buying a ticket and going to the show, obviously they sustain the band, so we'll do another album, we'll do another tour. And we have quite a lot of these people, and it's very enjoyable, the whole process.
And now, of course, you did cover a lot of the benefits. What is it like? One of the things that you have to do with crowdfunding, especially, is come up with some unique rewards. Has this extra layer of, I don't want to say aggravation, but work at the end, fulfilling some of these more extreme rewards that have been created out there? Some bands go further than others, but there's usually more than just an album and t-shirts. There's usually special things along the way as well.
Of course, you're trying to keep people excited, and they're getting in, and they have always like video updates and chats and stuff like that, things we could never dream of even like 10, 15 years ago. Now all of a sudden it's a standard, especially when you're dealing directly with fans, And we found our way to entertain ourselves. Actually, even those things, what in the beginning it seems like a drag because the guys running this website and all things digital. Because I have no clue how it works, honestly. So they do that, and they come up with ideas for merch, and they come up with ideas for updates and stuff like that. And I let them run with that unless it's something completely embarrassing. Then I'll say, okay, I'm not doing that. But most of the time, actually, I realized when in the beginning it was kind of a drag because I wasn't used to that. But now, after a couple of years, I see the fun part of it. And as I'm inviting the guys from a band for a barbecue, and we sitting here and have fun, have a couple of drinks. And then all of a sudden the camera appears and you're talking to people, directly. You can explain, okay, the next album's coming here and there, and here's the part of the song which is not completely ready yet, but you can check it out. And it's fun. It's almost like you have one of your friends coming over, so at least I feel it like that.
Yeah, no, it is a very loose and behind the scenes look that fans can often get, which is really cool.
Yeah, and a lot of people talking about that, and I agree to a point. All this mystique which kind of surrounded bands back in the day, it's gone. It's gone now. I could never dream about asking question to, I don't know, like Richie Blackmore or Cozy Powell or something like that. This was impossible. The only way I could kind of realize what they're doing is just by buying a magazine, and it was already 2 months old. Within the time he did an interview and the magazine hit the shelf, it's already, late. But anyway, that was the only way. Today, kids can go online and talk to whoever, at least send a message. But it's new times. It's so you have to adjust. You have to adjust somehow, and you can find the fun part of it for yourself. It is possible. It is possible.
All right. Well, let's move out of the studio a little bit and into the Royal Hunt live experience. The Cast in Stone tour, aside from one upcoming festival in Spain, is looking over, at least this leg of it. So let's talk a little bit about singers. Now, I haven't seen a lot of footage of the initial Royal Hunt singer, Henrik Brockman, but with every other one, John West, Mark Bowles, and once again now DC Cooper, they all have a high ability to carry a crowd in addition to being a great vocalist. Is that theatric element something that you have always focused on when looking for singers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very important, and because also if you think about it, it's a music a little bit more complicated than average hard rock band, just a little bit. So you need to live it up a little bit. This is because all of a sudden it will become stale, in a way. Because we do have some complicated parts here and there. It's not like we're playing something like Rush or Dream Theater or whatever, but still. So we have this progressive elements, but it should still be a show, entertainment. It's great when you have a frontman who's able to do that. But of course, with all the singers, which all of them are great, they're completely different. But the first thing you think about is when you're considering somebody is, of course, the ability to sing. Mm-hmm. And to carry the material. That's the first priority. But then the second one, of course, you look at the guy, if he can carry a crowd, and will he work in a live situation, because we are a very animated bunch, so of course you have to have a singer who can top that at least. And we were very fortunate to have all these guys, which all of them are great, so they can really do that and entertain the crowd without sacrificing the professional part of it.
Yeah, and you go back, in rock's earliest days, progressive rock at least, you had guys like Peter Gabriel and John Andersen, who even though they were handling very, heavy material, managed to bring, in John Anderson's case, fun, and in Peter Gabriel's case, theatrics to the stage to really help the show along.
Oh, absolutely! I saw some old footage. I never saw like Peter Gabriel back in the day with Genesis. So I didn't have the chance, but I saw some old footage unbelievable. I would love to see DC dressed like a frog or something like that. That would be fun, but probably will never happen.
That would be fun, but I don't see him doing that. Now, another thing that has always stood out about your live show, and this is one of those things that really sets Royal Hunt apart as far as a rock band, is that you insist always, usually two, sometimes one, but you always have a live backing vocalist, usually no other work, just backing vocals. Why do you think that's so important?
It is. I would say probably by now it's some kind of a tradition. When we started doing it, we had like two girls singing backing vocals, and a lot of people, back in the day, in the early 90s, it was considered it's not heavy metal, it's not hard rock, it's pop, but it's not. I mean, it might not be typical heavy metal back in the day, but it was great to have all these harmonies on stage, because back in the day you couldn't pre-record anything like you're doing today. Back in the day you're doing it live, or we don't have any backing vocals. And we're not great singers in this band. Everybody can carry a tune, everybody. But, I mean, if you really want something that is high harmonies and clear and the whole thing, you need help. And I use these two girls all the time. And, it became a tradition. And now we're just doing it. Of course, we still have some fly out and in, or fly in and out gigs when we can do that. Mm-hmm. For various reasons. Sometimes you can afford it. Sometimes there's just difficult logistically. So we're backing up. Still, everybody in the band sings, and but we do have some tapes in the background. So kind of give it a little bit of that size, I'll say size, to this backing vocals. But whatever possible, we still have backing singers. Yeah, sure. It's a tradition, and it sounds great. When it's live, it sounds great. It's completely different from having something pre-recorded, even if it's just tacked in there. Still, live vocals, there's something special about them.
Absolutely, and you'd mentioned flying gigs, so let me talk a little bit about that. In 2015, Royal Hunt performed at Prog Power USA. You performed Paradox in its entirety, and that would eventually become the Cargo live release. Uh-huh. Now, with a festival like that, you obviously have the bonus of a large crowd and a bunch of very receptive fans, potential fans. But on the flip side, what is it like on the preparation and emotional side that you're just doing one show, you have to perform a lot of material that you maybe not be familiar with, that you haven't played many years, what preparation, you have the travel, that weighs on you. What are those shows like where the high profile shows like that?
They're a bit tougher, but we were in this particular situation, we were pretty lucky in a way. When we got together with DC in 2010 or 11, we did this Paradox album on a very selective gigs, very selective shows, and so we were kind of like familiar with the whole thing, just like playing the entire album through, and as we did like in 97, 98. So it wasn't something which we started or had to start from scratch. But still, of course, there's a bunch of preparations there, which are a little bit extra. Another thing we were lucky with is at the same time we were playing Prog Power Festival, we were playing Loud Park in Japan, and we were playing this Rockingham in Britain. So it was free shows. So you didn't have this feeling, okay, yeah, we're doing all this work just because of one show. Because we can spread it, we can play free shows at least, which changed them a little bit, of course. But basically, you're preparing for free shows, so it makes it worthwhile, I guess. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's still very special. It was especially playing Prog Power because it was only the second time we played there. It's a great crowd. It's very well organized festival, one of the best ones. I mean, I can compare it to Sweden Rock, but it's huge compared to Prog Power. But still, the level of organization is very equal. It's very good. It's amazing. You're coming in, everything works, everything just slides, and you're not worrying about anything. It's pretty. The whole thing goes easy. That's a great thing. I mean, it's for musicians, especially when you're flying in, flying out. Everything is a little bit rushed in a way, always, and tiring. And then all of a sudden you're arriving at the scene, and everything is just works. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah. And, one thing I wanted to hit on, because you had mentioned you had a gig in Japan, and Royal Hunt has always had a lot of success in Japan with gigs like Prague Power, going to Japan, things like that. A lot of musicians will take a while before they get to the point where they're flying in for these gigs. How bad is the jet lag and things like that after that type of travel getting ready for these shows?
That can really, really screw you up. Yeah, it could. But the thing is, recently, what we did, we actually went to Japan through Russia. So what we do, we're adding hours gradually. So we go to St. Petersburg, we go to Moscow, we go to Vladivostok, and we're playing all the shows. And then you have only 2 hours to Japan. So it kind of eased the pain, all in all. But in some cases, when you're going straight to Japan, I have just one rule. Because when you're leaving your country, you're flying there in the morning, you're arriving in the morning. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty tough, So, but the only thing you have to do is just don't go to bed until, I don't know, like 11 o'clock or something like that. Do whatever you want, just don't sleep. Because if you do in the middle of the day, just for an hour, just a little nap, you screwed. That's it. I mean, you'll suffer the rest of the trip in Japan. So I'm always telling the guys, especially if you have a new person in the band or in the crew, and never did that before going to Japan and stuff. So always saying, like, try to stay awake the entire day. I know it's a drag, but try to go somewhere, see something. And then you go to bed like 10, 11, 12, whatever you go, and then next day you're fine. Mm-hmm. You'll be fine. You'll be able to perform in the whole thing. That's a trick.
All right, that's great for musicians to know who might be embarking on that for the first time. Of course, because everybody works up to those big gigs. Another real big live dynamic of the band, I would say, is your keyboard rig live. Even a lot of players now well known are cutting down to 1 or 2 keyboards, but you still usually most gigs have about a half dozen out on stage. What is the importance of bringing out that large number of keyboards?
First of all, because I started with that, so it's like a second nature. And but that's only one thing. And of course, you can say with all the advances in technology and stuff like that, yes, it is possible to cut it down a little bit. But there's various reasons why I still don't do that. One of them is like every keyboard which I selected have a very specific sound and feel to it. Of course, it's not as important as a guitar, which is completely like extension of you. Keyboards is not the same thing. It's plastic after all. But still, keys sound different, and they all sound different. They all feel different. So I prefer when I'm playing a Hammond, instead of playing a keyboard, emulating that. I prefer to play a real thing. Mm-hmm. Even if it's still electronic, of course, but it's a Hammond. And then you have a piano and whatever. I have my keyboard where I have all my solo sounds, lead sounds gathered there, which I built for years and years and years. That's one thing. Another one is, of course, you can cut it down, but then you have to push a lot of buttons. I'm changing a lot of sounds all the time. So I've been trying it some years ago just to ease up on logistics and stuff like that, and it doesn't work for me. I have to concentrate on playing, not on pushing buttons and changing sounds and stuff like that. So if I know, okay, for this song I need this Hammond sound or I need this string sound, I have it and I play with that. I'm not thinking, okay, in 4 bars I have to change this brass sound to the string sound or something like that. Mm-hmm. I don't have to think about it. I just know I have my brass sound on this keyboard, I have my string sound on another one. So I'm concentrating on playing. So it's, for me, that's the way to go.
All right, yeah, and if you're able to do it, it does certainly make things easier. Once everything's set up, it makes things a lot easier when you're actually playing. Definitely with you on that. Now, although I wanted to focus on Royal Hunt in general a little bit with the interview here, I definitely want to hit on the last album. As I mentioned earlier, it's Cast in Stone. It was the 14th studio album and the 4th since DC Cooper returned. Looking back on an album like 10, there was a focus on an older and more retro sound. Was there any particular aim on this album?
Yeah, I would say so. Every time we do a new album, so you find something to aim at, just to make it interesting. Well, it could be an idea or whatever it is, but we never start doing things the same way we did on the previous album. It's just boring. So we're not this type of band when using exactly the same amplifier every single time, because by now I can do it by heart. So I know this amplifier, I know how it sounds, I can put the microphone right there and I'll get exactly the same sound I had on the previous album. It's not what it's all about. So we're trying to improve a little bit. It's hard, and it's getting harder every year, not because we're perfect, but just because you learn so much, and yeah, you can improve a little bit and on here and there, but even those small things, they count. So we're doing it every time, but as you mentioned, 10, the aim was like to do this kind of retro sound, and it was also presented in songwriting as well. I was trying to emulate this kind of like 70s kind of thing. On this one, I didn't, and we went to as full sound as possible. We're still using a lot of analog gear, and the album was mastered to tape. So that was basically aim. Okay, how can stay current with sounds and using the latest in technology, but at the same time sounds as full and analog as possible.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned, of course, you want to change things up a little bit from album to album, of course, but at the end of the day, you want every album to sound good. What would you say as far as the process is concerned, recording, mixing, mastering, or something else? What is the most important point at which, you're going to make an album sound good, being someone that's worked in the studio for so long?
I mean, it's a cliche, but it starts with performance. It starts with every single player. I mean, I know it's cliche, it sounds so banal, but it is. The drum part is performed great. Of course, you can make it sound great. You can help it on the way, of course, by miking the drums specific way, changing skins, whatever you do, to make it better, to make it sound better. You can do that, but basically, it's in a performance. And some of the greatest albums we listen to it today, like take Led Zeppelin, for example. I mean, they don't sound perfect. It's not as much hi-fi as we expecting it today, but they sounds great. And we go back and listen to them all the time, even though they're not perfect sonically. So, but after performance is in place, yes, so I'm gathering all the experience I had in the last 25, 30 years. How can you polish the sound? How can you present it in the best possible way? So it's all in the production. Then you have mixing, the balancing thing to make it appear as a band. Everything is very elastic. It's supposed to be. Everything plays together. Everything matches. That's the mixing. And then the mastering, you're just making sure on whatever kind of speakers or headphones or whatever you're using today, it sounds equally good. It's a compromise. Of course it is, but you're trying your best. And then you listen to the album and you feel, okay, I did what I could. And already there, for me personally at least, I started looking for flaws. Oh, we could have done this. We could have done. Oh, why didn't we do that? And it's all, and it's terror. It terrorized me for months and months. And then new ideas start coming in, and I talk to the guys, and we're talking about, okay, let's do another album. And then all of a sudden, you think all these things which are kind of bugging you, for the last 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, and you say, okay, I won't do that again. I won't do this mistake again. But you'll do a new one. and I do that every single time.
Now,
yeah, that's excitement. That's excitement of it. I mean, we're human.
yeah, and you had mentioned before about, trying again to change amps or whatever it is to keep things fresh. That is one of the downsides. It sounds weird to say, but with this last album, the lineup was steady from the last album to this one. Is it almost harder to get that freshness in there? Because when you get a new guitarist, say, it's almost like getting a new toy to play with. You have naturally built new ideas and new sounds coming in. Is it a little bit harder to push that envelope when you have all the same guys returning?
Oh, in a way it is, because I know them by now. I know them so well, and I know the strong sides of them. So that, be it technique or be it a specific sound, even the way they prefer to attack this verse or chorus. I know how they do that. So of course, when I'm writing songs, I'm trying to accommodate it as good as possible. But at the same time, I mean, they're developing on their own. And they're coming in with some fresh ideas and interesting sounds, and even the amount of information I can squeeze out when they're criticizing me. Mm-hmm. It's actually the best part. I mean, as I said, like 20 years ago, it'll probably get on my nerves. But by now, I'm enjoying it. They're listening to some of the rough demos I have, and they start criticizing. And they go, this part, that part, this one is great, but this one is horrible. Can you change that? We don't need that part. And even out of that, we have so much input. And I'm one of these types, so I'm going, okay, I'll listen to it, and then I'll do as I've been told. And I remove something, I change something, and present it again. Sometimes they're right, sometimes I'm right. And we discuss it. And by the time we get to the point when we're actually recording, the whole original idea must be gone. All of a sudden, we go for a sharper guitar sound, more aggressive way of playing, and drums and bass. So it changed automatically. So you have to challenge yourself, and you have to challenge people around you to poke to them all the time, and they getting back at you. So that's cool. That's the greatest part of being in a band, because I said, in some interviews previously, I had various offers like 10, 15 years ago. Why don't you do solo thing? Because, I mean, I say everybody's talking about, oh, you're writing on the material and stuff like that. I don't want to go there, because I love being in a band. Mm-hmm. I love the challenges. Even if you fight people, and we do it all the time about stupid things. Like, we're still fighting like kids about, like, I don't know, a set list for an upcoming show. Everybody have their own favorites. And we're still trading like kids in a schoolyard. We're trading, okay, if we'll play this one, when you have to play this one. It's unbelievable. But it's so enjoyable. So I'm getting up every morning, and I'm enjoying every single day of it.
Yeah, and it comes back to things too, as far as you are the primary songwriter, and with the solo album that I am familiar with, it wasn't that far of a departure from Royal Hunt. So it almost says when you can do 95% of what you want to do anyway. I know people change and all that, but what's the point of a solo album if you're not doing something different, if you're not pushing well outside of what you're able to accomplish with the band that you enjoy being with?
Of course, so there's basically as I did the only album I did. I have like 4 solo albums all in all, and one of them was like a piano album, the Ocean View. It was like classical piano album, which I was just like, or should I call it a contemporary classical, because I wrote this stuff. But it was fun to do. It was just fun. It just happened. I happened to be at one of the studios and mixing some album, I don't remember which one, and we had a break. So I went there, and it was this kind of studio, and they're doing music for movies. So they had like sound stage and the whole thing, and they had like this grand piano. So I was sitting noodling on it, just playing something. And the engineer I was working at the time, he came in, he was listening to it. He said, you know what, you should do one of these, the piano album. So basically a year later I did, just for fun, so that was very different. But the previous one, Changing Skin and Black on Black, those solo albums I did, because the band, the Royal Hunt, was on a break. And I was bored. And we didn't play for various reasons, and so I was like walking around for weeks and weeks, and I said, okay, I'll do something. And it was a chance to work with different musicians, different singers, drummers, whatever. It was fun. It was fun. But if I could at the time, of course, I'll continue making like Royal Hunt albums. Of course, I just had like a year off, so I could as well do something else. So it was because of that, not because I was like in need of some creative. I don't know how you call it, like avenue.
Yeah, or an alley. Yep.
In Royal Hunt, no.
All right. And going back a little bit to the lineup, like I said, it's been very consistent over the years. The last 4 albums, at least here. What does that mean as far as the efficiency in the studio? I assume that it makes things a lot easier from a logical standpoint, just getting things done. I have to imagine that the process is a lot easier now that you have those guys returning time to time for these albums.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a plus. So even if we're talking about all this experimentation, the different things, and then the guitarist will come in and say, okay, got new amplifier, blah blah blah. Let's try this and that. What if? And but still, of course, I mean, it's a privilege, because they're very, very talented guys. They're professionals. They're coming in, and on top of that, they're good friends of mine. So you have like both worlds united in one room. You have a great friend, function great on a social level, and then he's a professional and he understands what you mean. You understand what he means. And you start recording, yeah, absolutely. So we're not wasting time on some beginner mistakes and stuff like that. We do know how it's supposed to sound, and where do we go, and how to go there, how to achieve that. That's a great bonus, of course.
All right. Well, let me finish with this. I've been a fan for over 10 years, so it's been a great pleasure. Thank you, Andre, for chatting with us today.
Thank you very much.
And whether it's with the newest album we talked about, Cast in Stone, an early gem like Clown in the Mirror, or my personal favorite, Paradox, I do hope the folks out there will check out Royal Hunt, see what they're missing. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
That was my interview with Andre Andersen, keyboard player and composer for Royal Hunt. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and get all of our interviews, as well as our weekly Talking Perspectives podcast. And of course, make sure you like us on Facebook and the YouTube and Twitter and all that good stuff as well. Now we're going to end with the lead single from the latest Royal Hunt album, Cast in Stone. This is Fistful of Misery. Enjoy.
us.